Well, hello there, my friends. Welcome back to SilverFest. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. Andy Schectman on behalf of Miles Franklin and James. James is just like a silver badass. You and Ronan. It's like, I like how we have all the different characters and he brought the silver chalice.
Nice.
That'd be fun. If we did like Foxy Boxing or like, a grudge match, like, you put the CFTC and JP Morgan on one side and just, I would love to hear them try and respond to questioning. For Christmas, anybody out there in the audience, what I would love for Christmas is subpoena power so that JP Morgan would be forced to legally answer questions from James Anderson and Ronan Manley. And if I could get the rights to film that, goodness, would it be hot. Anyway, until then, I know a question a lot of people have about storage. We hear if you don't hold it, you don't own it.
Let me correct that. If you can't hold it, you don't own it. That's the key. I mean, you have to have the option.
Okay. And I guess, we have two bullion experts, and I will let you guys take it away in a second. The one thought that comes up to mind for me often is that, yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, I think there's a lot of value in that. I think it's important that people understand why so many feel that way. Yet, Andy, you run a bullion shop. People know who you are. You're like a little YouTube celebrity now these days. You and James too. So, I mean, let's say you have $10 million of silver. I don't know that you want to throw that in your basement. And perhaps, everyone's situation is different. But, Andy, why don't you start? And any thoughts on storage and, if people do choose storage, what are the things they look for to make sure things are done properly and in the right way?
Did you ask me to start or James? I'm sorry, you pixelated there for a second.
Or actually, James, why don't you start? We'll see if that clears up. Andy, if you can give your feed a refresh, and James, while he's doing that, why don't you take it for us?
Yeah, sure thing. So when it comes to, gold and silver, the first and foremost thing when you get in the market is to have it in your hand, to physically own it outright in your hand, privately, quietly. Is the best way to have a little bit at home in case of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. But once you get to a certain threshold, and if your face is out there publicly, like myself or you, Chris, or Andy, I mean, this is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult to have a lot of precious metals in your home. Or if people in your circle of acquaintances or friends or family even know that you're a big silver and gold bull. This is where you got to start thinking in terms of risk and potentiality of things going really wrong and sideways. And so, look, this is not to fearmonger or anything like that. This is just to ensure that the people that have saved diligently and have this capital in gold and silver keep this gold and silver. And, the ultimate threat, people always talk about it, there's no counterparty risk in gold, et cetera. There is a counterparty risk, and it's other people stealing it. And that's, I think, the main key here. And so I'll let Andy run because he's now live with us because, obviously Miles Franklin has spearheaded storage and they have a great program. So go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, James. I appreciate that. I'll tell you a quick little anecdote. One day I was, and this doesn't apply to everyone else out there, who I think first and foremost you want to have as much at home until you lose sleep at night. Keeping it under your mattress or wherever you hide it and not telling anyone, for most people, is probably good enough. Yeah, for people in this industry, I was once driving in Houston, Texas with a bunch of gold, going to a Brink's depository, and a friend of mine called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have $500,000 in gold. I'm running to Brink's. I just left a client's house." He says, "My God, does anyone insure that?" I said, "No, it's not insured, but no one knows I'm here but me and you right now." He says, "Listen, I got a friend who works for R.J. Amundsen Insurance Company. Mind if I have him call you?" And I said, "No, not at all." I hang up. I keep driving down the road on my way to Brink's, and he calls me back 5 minutes later. And he says, "I just got to tell you what my buddy said to me when I called him." He said, "Yeah, gold dealers, they get shot in their driveway." So ever since that day, I've been a little bit more vigilant about and thought a little bit harder about keeping stuff at home. And that's one of the reasons why we We are so happy with our Brinks program in around United States and Canada. If you choose to store product at a third-party depository, just make sure it is a good third-party depository. If you buy from a company like mine or any other, don't store it with them. Store it with a third party. It's okay if that company administers the program, but make sure there are checks and balances in there. And that's right. There is no counterparty risk with gold and silver except that. And that is something people need to be careful of. And just remember this, that it's really most important just to keep your mouth shut. Loose lips sink ships. And as much as you want to be able to say, man, look at how cool that is, or look at this ounce of gold, it's awesome. But you do that too often or one too many times, and it's a bad outcome. So yeah, I think that storage is always a good idea once you lose sleep at night or feel uncomfortable. And in that case, there are lots of good alternatives out there, good choices to make.
So Andy, I've been involved in segregated non-bank storage with Brinks and Loomis pretty much ever since I've gotten this industry for over 12 years. And I wanted to hear what locations are you guys working with Brinks?
So we have some North American exclusives with Brinks in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Our safe deposit box program in Vancouver and Toronto, and our Bellwether original program in Montreal. We just brought our programs down into the States at JFK, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake City. Same fixed rate structure, which is something that differentiates our program above others, is that we negotiated a fixed rate with Brinks. And so it's based on the ounces that people store rather
than the price, I presume he was going to say.
Silver can do. Anyone who's in a normal segregated program, since March, their storage would have effectively gone up 150%. And I think if a lot of the things that we're all talking about and Chris talks about every day happen, it's going to go up a whole hell of a lot more than that. So yeah, with our Brinks program, the one thing that really distinguishes it is it's fixed rate based on ounces, not on value. And as price goes higher, that really the benefit of that becomes accentuated.
That's very key. And what is it in terms of like right now versus like a GLD annual fee or an SLV annual fee in terms of comparison?
So I think GLD and SLV, if I'm not mistaken, are 40 basis points. Right now, we can, depending upon volume on gold, we can get as low as probably 20, 25 basis points fixed on large amounts. On silver, it's a little bit different.
Right.
I would say right now, the very best we can do in our fixed rate in silver would be approximately right now about 50 basis points fixed.
So Andy, I think
close to it.
I think SLV is roughly that. So I mean, essentially, you're paying roughly the same price that SLV would be sucking out of your shares. So that makes total sense.
Right, and the one thing that's nice about storage too, I don't know whether you're storing with Miles Franklin or any other storage facility out there, the cost of storage is added to your cost basis, so it is tax deductible when the people sell. It's important to remember that. Any of you out there listening who have storage accounts, whether it's at Delaware Depository, Loomis in Vegas, or Brinks around the world, all of those fees that you're paying, you need to keep track of, and you add them to your cost basis so that one day when you sell, your cost basis is raised by the amount of storage that you have encumbered, and that is a way to defray the cost.
So Andy, that's great. Great tip. I never thought about that, but that totally makes sense. Well done.
Thank you. We got that from one of the largest accounting companies, firms, and nationwide accounting firm. They have offices all around the United States. And if you'd like that, James, I'd be happy to send you the article we have on that, or the letter we got from them saying this is the case. Yeah,
that's very interesting.
And gentlemen, we have a question in the silver chat to the side of our screen. I'll make this a two-parter. Sorry, I know I'm not great at sticking to one question. Someone said, can Chris learn to finish his first sentence before he goes to the next one? I'm learning that. I get so many great things about silver to dig into. And Tim P says, can storage records be audited by by Revenue Canada or the IRS? And maybe also you can comment, I know even more general than that, people wonder when they buy gold or silver, is there a record of that the government can? What records do you keep? So, James, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience in this industry, I've worked with various bullion dealers who have various vault storage facilities. And in terms of like the government or anyone coming in, I mean, they'd have to have, they'd have to have a court order essentially to be able to come in. I mean, they would effectively have to be, basically investigating criminal activity to have any access to such records. So if you're just an average law-abiding citizen, very, very, very unlikely anything like that is ever going to happen. And on the second front, in terms of tracking and tracing and knowing who has what, et cetera, I mean, I've been trained in anti-money laundering many years by one of the best in the industry. And you would be amazed at how little the government really knows. Unless they really want to do something and they come in with court orders, it's very rare, it's very unlikely that they would know, what you've ordered, where you have it, et cetera. You'd literally have to have someone basically hacking your entire records on your computer and your email, et cetera. So I don't buy that for a minute. I think a lot of people, they have a fear of that, and it's a healthy paranoia to have, but I think it's overblown. And I think as long as you are playing by the rules, knowing what the rules are, and you do it diligently, I think you'll be fine.
All right. And Andy, any comments there?
Yeah, I agree specifically with what James is saying. In 30 years, we've had 3 subpoenas, all 3 of them related to criminal activities that these people were involved in. Short of that, there's never been any prying eyes. Revenue Canada has nothing to do with our program or our clients. I've never had any conversation with them other than when we set it up and got everything in order to make sure we were following the rules. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's really anyone's worry, with the exception of, if the rules change and they came and knocked on our door and said, show us your records. It's kind of hard not to do that. Short of that, that's not good. But that's the same risk you're going to have everywhere. I noticed, just as an aside, someone commented, well, they only store in Switzerland. I'd like to make mention of that I've been doing this for a very long time. Our business was founded on Swiss annuities. And I remember not too many years ago when the Swiss kicked every American out of Viamet, and they kicked everyone out of Union Bank of Switzerland, kicked everyone out of Credit Suisse, and they were all forced to find somewhere to go in 60 days, period. So even the best laid plans need to be reevaluated. We think that this is as good as it gets for now. In a world of imperfect choices, it's as good as it gets, and that's the best you can do.
All right. And guys, we have a couple minutes left. I'm going to we'll do a rapid fire round. Try and keep the answers brief if is possible. Quick thoughts, Brinks, safe, trustable, Andy?
100%. It's the most trustworthy institution I've ever walked in and dealt with in 30 years.
Thank you, sir. James, what happens if shit hits the fan and our silver isn't in another state or vault won't open due to no electricity or anything else?
Oh, the ultimate question of if the entire grid fails, and we used to battle with that a little bit years back at one of the outfits I worked at, and in old Russia, when things went wrong, people were using fax machines, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand the concerns about redundancy and building redundancy and having the capability to access your precious metals in case of the worst natural disaster or something along those lines. And this is why, in my experience, typically is people, once they get to a certain threshold, don't want that much in their home because they're afraid of home invasions or somebody coming in and stealing it when they're out of town, et cetera. And then secondly, if they're going to use a private vault storage facility, they usually like to have it within state lines, so closer to home. So physically, if they have to, they could drive and go there personally and pick it up directly. And those options typically exist at most locations. So that's one thing to consider. If you were in Florida, I would suggest looking at, a place in Miami. There's various vault storage facilities. If you're in Canada, depending on where you are, Vancouver, as Andy's talking about, they have a Brinks there, Montreal, etc. So it really is a question of a few different things. I really, you tried to tell me to keep the answer short, but that's an hour-long discussion.
Well, I appreciate that. Andy, any preference, experience with safes and locks? Maybe not the details, but are there any models or kinds that someone might want to look into?
You know, I think a good idea for people is to go get a safe and put it somewhere where people would find it, and put it in an office or what have you, a big enough safe to attract attention, and fill it up with stuff that would make people happy. $1,000 in cash, handful of silver coins, and all your important documents and your old jewelry, whatever. Go to a gun shop where you can buy a handgun and get a tiny little safe with bolts in it, and stick it to your stud up in your attic or under the stairs. You could put a very nice chunk of metal in there. Short of that, the only safe you want to get if you're storing lots and lots of mint boxes is a shotgun safe. Go to a Dick's or a Cabela's, tell them that you hunt, you have 12 shotguns, and you want a safe delivered to protect your shotguns from your family. That's going to be the bet. And you want to make sure it's fire rated. So it's going to cost you about $2,000 to get a really nice fire rated safe that will hold a dozen mint boxes or so.
All righty. Last one before we wrap up here. Samuel has asked about OWNX. I'm not familiar with that. Perhaps if either of you are, it sounds like perhaps as a storage option. James, any idea?
Yeah, I've known them for a long time. I think they originally were they were working out of Delaware. It's Silver. I forget the full name, but they changed their name to OwnX, and it's essentially a storage option where people can buy physical gold and silver backed, and it's held at in the gold storage facility in Delaware. So yes, I know of them. I've met these guys. They're in Kansas, I believe, in Kansas City. Very good guys. I met them years back, and they're honest, hardworking fellas, and they're proper folks in our industry. So I certainly think OwnX is a quality program.
All righty. Well, gentlemen, Andy Schectman of Miles Franklin, James Anderson of SD Bullion. Sure appreciate you shedding some light on that topic. One other thing before we wrap up, that just something that's always been important to me since I've started doing this, and I think this is a perfect example of where, I understand everyone has their business and their functions, and, but here we have two people who have similar businesses, yet what I think is special about silver and what I've at least attempted to facilitate is that, it's like once this stuff finally happens, we're set up so that there's this massive pie for everybody. And I love that we can have people, even, just multiple bullion dealers, multiple miners, all on board with the same purpose for the same greater cause. So I sure appreciate that.